We're now going to pivot and hear an overview of MEREDA's legislative agenda. MEREDA's mission is to promote an environment for responsible development and ownership in Maine, and our advocacy work provides our members great value. We have created a strong voice in the advocacy world in Augusta, which is driven by the very active Public Policy Committee. Thanks to Paul Peck. Paul, are you here somewhere? I don't know. I can't see, but if he's here, Paul not only does that, he's a past president, he's very involved in MEREDA and in the community, and if you go to Sugarloaf, he's very, very involved there. So Paul, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you do. And also to Jason Howe or Pretty Flaherty. Jason, are you there? He's the co-chair. He'll be stepping up to chair. Here we are, right in the front row. Great. Thank you so much for all the work you do, and it's just great. Also from our Legislative Council team is Elizabeth Frazier from Pierce Atwood. They have consistently helped MEREDA pass legislation that improves Maine real estate climate. Here's Elizabeth to tell you more about what they're working on this session. And there we are.
Stage wobbles a little. Takes some getting used to. There we go. Oh, perfect. And this works. Oh, great. Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's so great to be back at the Holiday Inn and to have such a big crowd here for the MEREDA Forecast Conference. I have to say this is always my favorite event of the year, seeing all of you, getting to catch up with the really great work you're all doing in real estate and development. But I got to say, I want to start out my legislative advocacy update today by applauding the work that is done at the UMaine Composites Lab and done by Dr. Dogger, because it is so uplifting and so encouraging, really innovative and exciting work that I will gladly take with me when I go back up to the State House and help energize for all the times that it can be rather challenging, which you'll hear a little bit about today. So thank you very much. Okay, so who we are. You heard Craig talk a little bit about this, but we are the Public Policy and Local Issues Committee. We have a very diverse membership made up of a good cross-section of the types of people who are MEREDA members. What we believe, we seek to promote an environment for responsible development of real estate ownership throughout the state. And through the work of the Public Policy Committee and the Local Issues Committee, we try to achieve meaningful changes to state and local policy that benefit MEREDA members. There we go. And those are Craig mentioned them, so I won't repeat it, but here are our two committees and the chairs. Craig didn't talk about local issues, so I will say our wonderful chairs of that committee, Ben Brennan, and I'm sure John Finnegan's here somewhere, do tremendous work keeping our members engaged on what's happening at the local level. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but it really is led by these two really wonderful gentlemen. I'm very lucky to work with them. Okay, so I want to spot here for a minute and talk a little bit about what we believe on the public policy front. And I've listed some things here, but I'm not going to repeat them. They're the types of things you've heard me talk about before, the importance of incentives, et cetera. When I was listening to the keynote address a few moments ago, I thought, all of these amazing and incredible creative things that are happening, the excitement in housing, the excitement in land use development, planning. You're going to see me talk about all of the things that the legislature is thinking about doing. It's a housing revolution. But if you think of building a house and think of the house as the project itself, you'll never be able to cite it with smart growth principles. Build it with the 3D printer that the University of Maine Laboratory is perfecting. Electrify it with deep water turbines or solar or other really creative energy types that we don't even know about yet. And you'll never be able to make it affordable. If the land that it sits on, and the land is the legal basis, is really a sink pit. And that will continue unless MEREDA keeps doing their great work that it does in Augusta with public policy to try to really work on that very basic legal underpinning that is the core of development, because none of those things will happen if that core is not there. And so we've had some great success over the last year in some of that, and I will share it with you. Similarly with local issues, where we work in Augusta to sort of work on incentives, to balance mandates, we do the same thing at the local level. We also try to communicate with the localities about what the new exciting things that are happening are and how they can take advantage of them. I actually want to pause here for a minute to share with you. I don't think it's in my later slides, so I want to be sure to mention it. Many of you remember the State Planning Office and its demise, timely or untimely, several years ago, many years ago, over a decade ago now. In the absence of the State Planning Office, there has been a real vacuum for leadership, guidance for municipalities and communities. For a long time, they were kind of able to manage that. There wasn't really a lot going on in Maine. But over the last 5 to 6 years, a tremendous amount has gone on in Maine. And now we need to build more housing. And now we need to change our energy types. And there are a lot of really important things that the state is saying we have to do, providing resources to do it. But how do the towns actually do it, right? They're just often a small group of people. How do they really make that happen? And who do they talk to about what they need? So, Representative Melanie Sachs from Freeport put in a bill that would create sort of the State Planning Office 2.0. I think they're calling it the Office of Community Affairs or Community Engagement. And it would essentially create a one-stop shop for municipalities. So if you're a municipality and you're having difficulty with PFAS in your town hall water system, you could call the Office of State and Community Affairs, and they could help connect you to someone at CDC drinking water program, rather than you having to go online and find out exactly who you need to call. So this will be helpful both to municipal leaders and to individuals engaged in the community and engaging in communities. And I think it's really exciting. Governor Mills put it in her supplemental budget proposal about a week and a half ago. So I'm very optimistic that this will come online and hopefully help bridge the gap between what we're doing in Augusta and what happens locally to really make those things sort of a more functional and effective conduit. I already talked about that. Aha, excellent. Okay, so backing up to where I was about what happens if the underlying land is sort of a mud sink. All of this creative work that's going on in Augusta right now before the Housing Committee often looks at the big picture. There's a lot of bills that would rewrite the Growth Management Act. They're all very great and meritorious, by the way, and MEREDA is very happy to be helping with all of them. Rewriting subdivision, looking at incentives for affordable housing, looking at ways to incentivize home ownership, looking at zoning. Of course, you all remember the former LD 2003, now probably best known as the Housing Act, that sort of forayed the state into local affairs and said, hey, you can put a duplex on anything that's single-family sited, and there are other provisions in that as well. So all of these really sort of bold thinking policy ideas that the legislature is working on are incredibly important for the long-term growth of housing, the long-term planning of the state. But MEREDA really excels at taking a look at how we can fix the smaller, bite-sized issues that absolutely impact our lives on a day-to-day basis, and really try to improve that sort of core foundation for policy for development. And this is one of the things we did. So we actually put this bill in, let's see, it would have been December 2022, which was right at the beginning of the 131st legislature that we're currently in. The bill had a public hearing fairly early last year. It is LD 975, which is actually now a public law, Chapter 149, and took effect last October. So if any of you have encountered anything to do with elevators or elevator inspections in your line of work over the last probably many years, you know that it is an incredible challenge. And perhaps the state has not been aware of the challenge that exists. Well, thanks to Ben Brennan, the state is now aware of the challenges that exist. And there has actually been a sort of two-pronged approach to helping alleviate some of the issues around getting elevators into new construction and getting them up and running. This was really the first bite at the apple. This bill actually aligned Maine's elevator safety standards with the International Building Code. Maine implements the International Building Code through the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code, otherwise known as the MUBEC. Every town in Maine has to enforce the MUBEC. If you have less than 4,000 citizens in your town, you don't have to enforce any building code, but if you do enforce any, it has to be the MUBEC. So, in other words, it's a universal code. It speaks at length to, the importance of the size of the elevator, how many stops it needs to make, what levels it needs to arrive on, how many there need to be. That's all very well covered in that code, and again, it's an international code. But Maine had this wonky old statute on the books that said, well, no, an elevator has to stop at every floor, and it's got to be this particular size. And lo and behold, it turned out that the department started interpreting stopping at every floor to mean things that no one really expected it to ever mean. And we realized that there was a misalignment between what is in the building code and what basically the rest of the world does with respect to elevator safety standards and Maine's statutes. So we put in this bill. We were very lucky to have Representative Ed Crockett of Portland sponsor this for us. I'll just a little bit of insight. It was Representative Crockett's bill in part because this was a challenge that they faced at the new USM dorm, Portland Commons. And so he obviously was aware of that and wanted to help. So the IDEA committee was very supportive of this effort. And as I said, it did become law last fall. Oh, I don't want to move on before mentioning the second prong, which is that there are not enough elevator inspectors. That is something that Ben has been very studiously working on up in Augusta. We now have the commissioner of the Department of Regulation that oversees these issues. Very much on top of this issue, she has requested additional funding through the supplemental budget, and there are stakeholder meetings going on between members of the development industry, elevator companies, and her department, as well as legislators, to talk about ways to solve this issue. Oh, and a shout out to Greg Payne, if he's here, from the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future, because he's been a really incredible liaison between I would say the development community, generally, the development community and the governor's office, really helping to effectuate what the governor has said she wants. And it's been a really, really big boon to the folks in this room. So thank you very much, Greg, wherever you are. And thanks to Ben. So what else did we do? This is another exciting one. It's another great example of MEREDA doing something relatively small in law that will hopefully have big impacts down the road. I think I mentioned this last year, so I won't talk about it too much, but essentially there was a problem where you have a big mill and you want to rehabilitate it. So you bring in a developer who specializes in rehabilitation and he gets the job done. Okay, great. But that developer probably doesn't want to then go on to do an affordable housing project in one part of the mill and some retail in another part and whatever else goes over here. They want to move on to developers who specialize in that. Unfortunately, under Maine law previously, you couldn't transfer an unfinished condominium. And these are unfinished because they were going to be finished off by the folks who were going to build the units and the retail, et cetera. The reason the condo bit comes into play here is it's one of the easiest, most functional ways to divide up a piece of property of the size of a mill. And so it's a very handy tool. Thank you very much to Gary Vogel for bringing this to our attention. We have now fixed the law so that you can, in fact, transfer an unfinished commercial condo unit, so long as there are certain factors in place and there's been a writing between the initial developer and the person who's taking it on. This will really help unlock LIHTC projects in these types of large buildings, because that way the LIHTC developer doesn't have to get engaged with all of the other things that are happening in the building, muddling their finances, which, as you all know, if you're engaged in LIHTC, must be kept, very clean and neat and in compliance with all the state funding. So this was a small but I think very important change to the law that will help us in rehabilitation and also just making better use of the Maine Condominium Act. Okay, what we achieved, public policy, our last bill. This one hasn't been passed yet, so I'm very excited to talk to you all about it and hopefully encourage you all, if you have a moment, to reach out to the Housing Committee and ask them to support this bill. LD 772, our shorthand for it is permitting predictability. This is being sponsored by Senator Matt Pouliot, who is sitting somewhere over there, and he's been absolutely wonderful in leading the way on this bill for MEREDA. A really important issue, again, something that sort of may seem under the radar to a lot of folks because it's not flashy. It doesn't rewrite a whole chapter of law. It's a very small amount of language, but it will hopefully have big impacts, and I want to explain that. The idea for this bill most recently arose because there was a project down in Kittery. Many of you may know about it. This was from 2022. Would have been about 900 units of housing, mixed, affordable, additional other mixed-use development for walkable communities. It was going to be sited in a part of Kittery that the town had recently rezoned for exactly that purpose, to allow that kind of mixed-use development and get affordable housing in there. And unfortunately, once the project got underway, the application was being considered by the town. A very angsty group of citizens put together a petition and got the council to pass an ordinance retroactively applying to the application that was pending. And in this case, it actually rezoned the underlying land back to industrial. So that just completely killed the project. Similarly, but a little bit different, in Brunswick in 2022, you may recall there was a building moratorium and some retroactive ordinances. This is a similar situation. In Brunswick, one project did go forward after that retroactive application. The other did not. That would have been about 400 units of housing. So that's just in the last 4 years, 1,300 units of housing that would probably be coming online this year. That didn't happen because of retroactive ordinances. And do not be fooled into thinking that this isn't going to be an even more aggressively used tactic in the future. It applies as much to affordable housing projects as it does to commercial real estate development, as it does to mixed-use development. There are no protections in Maine law once you submit a land use application for consideration, and the town has said, yeah, this is good, we're ready to look at it. You are not protected from a retroactive ordinance. And we all know that in small towns, it can be very easy for a small group of committed citizens to have a big voice, an outsized voice, and oftentimes succeed in unwinding these projects. There are a lot of factors that go into blocking NIMBYism. This is one of them. We think it's the one that is the most important at the moment because we see it as a tool that is being used pretty aggressively. The good news is that the bill did receive a unanimous ought to pass as amended report from the Housing Committee on February 2nd, 2024, so pretty recently. We did hit a small snag with respect to the language. We think we will have no problem getting that cleared up, and in fact, we think the language will be even more robust than what we initially submitted, which is always a great place to end up. So there's still a few sort of administrative nuts and bolts to tackle with that bill, but I am optimistic that hopefully with all of your support, again, if you can reach out to the Housing Committee, hopefully we can get this done and really sort of put a stake in the ground to the concept of fair play. Because it's just fair to say that once you've acted on reliance, and I don't mean legal term of reliance because that's very hard to prove, but general human reliance on laws that are on the books that were duly passed. And not only that, but laws that were on the books that were duly passed after God knows how many hours were spent on comprehensive planning and town meetings and listening sessions, and spent money with third parties to redo the zoning code, and all of these things that the state says it wants, that the federal government says it wants, that towns say they want, that are good things because they lead to smart growth and they lead to community development. None of it matters if a small group of people can easily unwind that. So we did, when we initially put this in, have support from the City of Westbrook, Dan Stevens, thank you very much, as well as Mock and others, and just an interesting final point on this bill because I think it is important. In some of our research over the last week, we discovered that in 2006, I doubt she's here, but if she is here, I'll be thrilled. Senator Heather Sanborn, when she was at the University of Maine School of Law, wrote a law review article on the lack of protections that exist for applications pending before a land use review authority, and actually spoke specifically to the problem of why are we doing all of this planning work and the state is signaling that it wants all of this work, but then there are no protections for it. So that was about 18 years ago that she wrote that, and it's been very persuasive, obviously, to some members of the committee, and hopefully we can solve this problem that has been out there in the ether for a fairly long time. So if you can, please write to members of the Housing Committee. I'll be here all afternoon, so find me. Happy to share the best way to do that. And if we are successful, hopefully we can get a few more projects really going this year and over the next few years. Oh, yes, this is my only slide with animation. Hang on. How do I? It's not working quite as well as I'd hoped it would. Oh, here we go. It was supposed to be a lot more kind of bombardy. There we go. So obviously I've talked a little bit already about some of the things that are happening in Augusta with respect to housing, but it is a housing revolution, and it's very exciting. It's a very exciting time for everyone in this room, not to be cynical about it, but it's a good business opportunity for everyone in this room. It's a great time for the state of Maine. And one of the reasons it's gotten so much momentum is not just because of the crisis and the lack of housing that is available. That is incredibly important, and it was certainly the original driving factor. Obviously, we have a tremendous amount of unhoused. We have folks who simply can't afford to live in the housing they're living in. There's very little choice. There is no stock, and when there's no stock and high demand, you have high prices. So all of those things were certainly driving factors, the biggest driving factors. But optimistically, there is another piece of this, and that is that projections for the state of Maine as a general matter are very rosy over the next 10 to 15 years. Some of the things that aren't as great for other parts of the country, like global warming, are going to be really great for Maine. We're already seeing climate migration. Now that remote work is online, people have always wanted to live in Maine. They're moving here, they're staying here. We're seeing that they're staying here. It's all bets in on Maine, as far as I'm concerned. So housing is a really important component of that. And some of the largest employers in the state have been really screaming that we need more housing. Some of them are building their own. I think probably many of you know that Bath Iron Works is building their own housing. I think Jackson Labs built some of their own housing. But all the things you see here are parts of modernizing the way that we do housing in Maine, the way that we plan for it, finding better ways to heat the homes, looking at all the goals that we have as a state while also producing really great housing that is attainable and affordable for the majority of Maine families, wherever you are. Whether you're in southern Maine or you're in Bangor or you're in down east, having access to homes that are efficient, that are safe, and that fit your needs are obviously things that we all care very deeply about in the real estate community. So before I move on, I'll just give you an example. These are all actually bills that are hot and happening. So Thriving Corridors Bill, Growth Management Act, subdivision, pre-approved buildings, and historic tax credit were all submitted by Grossmart and Build Maine as part of their Policy Action 2023 look at how can we sort of revolutionize Maine's policies around growth and development writ large. Whether or not some of these are going to be enacted this year, I don't know. They're fairly weighty and comprehensive. I think the committee will probably look to do one or two, maybe some bite-sized pieces, but continue to have these conversations into the next legislature. So these are things that might not happen right away, but are very much on the radar up in Augusta. Some of the other ones, there is another historic tax credit bill to raise the cap on substantial projects. That is looking pretty good, and MEREDA is supportive of that, and will continue to urge for the funding for that bill in the next few weeks. Which leads me to my other pitch for the day. Sometime in the next few weeks, the legislature will start to wind down and adjourn. As that happens, they're going to begin to look at bills with a price tag. And some of the bills that MEREDA supports, none of the ones that we put in, but many bills that we support, do have price tags. So, for example, affordable home ownership, Maine State Housing has requested additional money for that program. We're very supportive of that. Historic tax credit, both the small project set aside and that large project cap expansion. Those are things we support, and we will probably reach out to all of you asking you to write to the Appropriations Committee to say these are meritorious and they deserve to be funded. So look for alerts on that sometime in the next couple of weeks. And then I've spoken a little bit about local issues, but I wanted to just sort of say that while all these great things are happening in Augusta, and I did talk about this last year, I think it's changed a little, but we do continue to see resistance at the local level. And I don't think it's necessarily all NIMBY resistance. That is a very big component of it. NIMBY resistance, though, tends to come from private citizens. The resistance that we are seeing, or that many of you may be seeing by municipal leaders, actually comes more from a place of lack of resources. Again, this is where a one-stop shop is going to be really helpful for them as more resources come online. A lack of planning office, right? Many towns don't have a planning office, so they don't know how they're supposed to implement the provisions of LD 2003. There isn't enough infrastructure in a particular part of town, but they'd like to build there. How do they do that? All of these things lead to challenges for municipalities, and understandably for some of them, frustration as they try to solve the problems of their communities, but also make inroads into a really big statewide issue. And so as all of that goes on, MEREDA is working to promote the great projects that are happening in our towns. You'll see in the next few weeks we'll be doing some articles on specific projects, just sort of highlighting the interesting work that's gone on. You know, how did the project get built? What hurdles did they encounter along the way? What might have made it better? Things that I think will help shed a light on all the creative work that's being done to tackle some of the challenges that still exist to get to housing creation. So you'll see some of that coming online. We also obviously continue to encourage localities to incentivize. At a time when costs are so high, land costs are high, all costs are high, incentives have great appeal and attraction, and we believe they really will have an impact in getting the kinds of housing built that communities have said they want built. Oh yeah, look, I did a little. That's our exciting coming new adventure. And I think I have one more slide. Oh, nope, that was it. Yes, so I want to just end by, I think I would be remiss if I didn't say that I'm very grateful to all of you in this room and to all of the MEREDA members who work really tirelessly on a volunteer basis to help me understand the nuances of the law, what you're facing out there, how I can help, talking to legislators, doing all of the things that actually make it possible for MEREDA to achieve these really core and foundational sort of modernizations to Maine law that I hope will have a really big impact on risk reduction and growing housing creation across the state of Maine. So I want to thank everybody in this room. I want to say we're heading into a very interesting political year. I am aware of that. Hopefully everything will be wonderful and rosy as it has been up at the Maine State Legislature so far. But I'll continue to keep you all posted no matter what happens. So thank you all very, very much, and I look forward to continue to work with you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, thank you. That was awesome. Elizabeth, we work with her a lot. Not only is she a great voice for us in Augusta, she's really a great ear for us for what's happening in these local communities. And if you're not tuned in, get tuned in what's happening in your local communities. There's a lot of great things happening, but there's some nutsy things happening there too. And Elizabeth has been great in helping us get in front of those and stopping some of those. So Elizabeth, thank you so much for all your work.